Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Van, and this is the Book Trek 2023, the Deep Space Nine tag. So this is one of those nosy tags created by Steve Donahue for the Book Trek 2023 event. Book Trek is an annual event where we basically just read Star Trek fiction. Super nerdy, but also super fun. This year is the summer of Trek, so in June, July, and August, we have been reading Star Trek fiction. August is almost over. But before it ends, I wanted to get to these tag questions that Steve created. He has created a tag around, this is now the third series. So he did an original series tag, he did a Next Generation tag, and now, of course, we have the Deep Space Nine one. And these are not the kind of tag questions that you usually get on BookTube. They're not bookish, really, questions for the most part. They are, I would say, more nosy. That's the kind that he likes. So also makes them a little bit easier sometimes to do. So let's begin. Number 1, Captain Sisko, the Emissary. Are you religious? Does organized religion play any role in your life? And I would say no. I am a deeply secular person by nature. That's something that I kind of discovered about myself when I was fairly young. I was raised in a very relaxed Catholic setting. We went to church maybe on holidays. We didn't pay all that much attention to things otherwise. But I remember, my kind of road to atheism really began when I was probably in middle school, I think, and I was at the communion of one of my cousins, and I was bored, and when I'm bored, I seek out things to read. That's one of the reasons why I'm a more bookish person. And so I started reading the pamphlet material that was in the pew before me, in the little, if you've ever been to a Catholic church, you'll know the stuff that they have stuffed in there. And one of them, it was a pamphlet for joining the priesthood. And my grandfather happened to be sitting in front of me, and he turned around and saw me reading it, and he asked me, "Oh, you want to join the priesthood?" And I think I kind of gave a non-committal look, and he just kind of said, "Oh, good, that's a good thing." And he turned around again, and that kind of made me more interested in the thing that I was reading. And then I started looking at that priest a little more closely, who was speaking to, the mass of people inside the church, and I saw the kind of pull maybe that he had. It started making me think. And the other thing that was going through my head, which was probably atypical for most people, I have been a lifelong horror fan. And what I also started thinking is, if I joined the priesthood, I could do exorcisms, and I could help people who have haunted houses. And again, remember, I'm like, 11 years old when I'm thinking all this. But that's the kind of stuff that was going through my head. And it made me start thinking seriously about, like, hey, what if this priesthood thing ends up being, something that I could really think about. So that set me on the road to actually starting to read the Bible and look into Catholicism at first, and Christianity as a whole, and realizing I was not believing any of this stuff. And then it was maybe 2 years later or something, I had first heard the word aesthetic. And I went to go look it up in the dictionary. And I came across the word atheist. And up until that point, up until seeing that definition, I guess it just hadn't occurred to me that not believing in a God was a possibility. I didn't know there was a word for it. I guess I just didn't think in those terms. But the second I read that definition, it was like a lightning bolt from the blue. I knew that, oh, that's me. Like, that just completely described me. And really, ever since that moment, I knew that I was not a person who lost his faith. I'm somebody who discovered that I never really had it. Like I said, I'm deeply secular. To put religious aspects in a lot of things, especially in a very monotheistic way, Judeo-Christian, and that sort of route, really confuses things about the world for me. Things make far more sense without it, in my opinion. They always have. So I knew I was not religious whatsoever by the time I was really in high school. And at that point, this is before you had the so-called New Atheist movement of like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, which really, what was new about it was really this marriage of atheism and anti-theism. That's in this vocal anti-theism, which I had a lot of sympathy for, but I was kind of already there at that point. They didn't move me along my way. I was kind of, when I was reading those books, I was already in agreement. But although I would say that in certain aspects, my anti-theism has softened over the years, not necessarily when it comes to certain monotheistic religions. I'm just not somebody who has, let's say, a great amount of faith in faith. Okay, but I have become more appreciative of ritual, and I've always recognized a need or a desire for people to, basically touch the transcendent, to be part of something larger, to lose themselves in that way. So, at this point, I am somebody who still, I appreciate a lot of ritualistic aspects. I am somebody who has been very curious about atheopaganism, and especially of the Norse variety, kind of like Norse paganism, and adopting some of those things in my life, not as a matter of faith in any way, not as a matter of belief, purely to add some more mythopoetic into my life. Because, I do think there are some drawbacks to being deeply secular. And it's not that I think that's a bad thing, but I realize that I have a harder time paying attention to certain things that I think people of certain religious backgrounds maybe do, like just paying attention to the calendar year more and the changing of the seasons, and remembering and discussing ancestors and those who, who have moved on, who have passed. I just don't have a lot of prompts within my life to recognize those things, and I want those things more. So that's why I look at things like paganism to adopt from, but not wholly become immersed in. So, sorry, it's a very long answer, but it's also a complicated answer to a fairly simple question. Number 2, Major Kira, the former resistance fighter. Have you ever been in any kind of combat, armed or unarmed? No, I did some high school wrestling and got into a little scrap here and there, but that's about it. I'm not somebody who has certainly not been in, armed combat, unless you count, a little bit of HEMA and practicing sword fighting with my friends, but that was never anything serious. That was just messing around. So no, I'm usually pretty good at avoiding those kinds of situations. Number 3, Chief Engineer O'Brien, Keiko's husband. Have you, I like this is Keiko's husband. Have you ever had, or do you currently have, a nagging wife? If so, how often do you contemplate killing her and making it look like an accident? No, I have a pretty good relationship with my wife. There is definitely times when you just kind of want to be alone in the house, and there's certain things that your partner wants to get done that you're just not in the mood for. So those sorts of things happen, but no, I would not say nagging. That's a normal relationship. Number 4, Constable Odo, the shapeshifter. Do you shapeshift in your daily life? Are you very different in different settings? So much so that we on BookTube would be surprised. I would say no, not necessarily. I certainly have to, because of my profession. I'm a teacher, so my classroom is very PG. If we were hanging out drinking, I would not be nearly as PG. It would certainly, be a lot more free with a rated R type of conversation. On BookTube, I keep it very, I guess you could say, PG-13. So I definitely adjust myself, but I don't think that I'm all that different on here or anywhere else. It's just a matter of how much I am allowed to say when. That's about it. Number 5, Science Officer Jadzia Dax, centuries old. What's your relationship with science? Have you studied it? How much of it plays a part in your life? I've never studied it seriously, but I would say I've always had a fascination and appreciation for it. I certainly took, some science in high school, some electives. When I was in college, I took a biology course and an astronomy course. But I haven't like ever seriously studied it beyond like an introductory level. But I do like reading pop science books, science documentaries, going to science museums, that sort of thing. Yes, I do like that, and I like reading some science news. I don't have a deep understanding of how everything works, but I definitely, certainly appreciate it, especially things like astronomy. I really do like that. Um, Jake Sisko, the commander's son. Were you annoying as a kid? How annoying on a scale of 8 to 10 are your own kids? I've been told that I was a pretty easy kid, especially compared to my brother. I think my brother was more challenging. He's a great guy now, but I think he was a more challenging child. But no, I've been told I was pretty easy as a kid, and my kids overall are also pretty easy. As a parent, you have the usual interruptions. When you're trying to speak to your spouse and you keep getting somebody trying to interrupt your conversation with whatever you have to look at in that moment. Those sorts of things happen, but that's pretty typical. 7, Lieutenant Worf, Chief of Security. Was there ever a time when you were embarrassed by your parents? What role do they play in your life? Not really. Both my parents are still around. I would say I had a pretty good upbringing. They didn't, I said for me to be embarrassed by my parents, it would have to be whatever they were doing, which somehow I feel like was reflecting on me, and that doesn't happen very often. The one thing that did used to embarrass me was when I was in middle school and high school, because they were both chain smokers, and my clothes would smell like cigarette smoke. So I'd always have teachers and adults especially assuming that I was a smoker. That used to irritate me to no end. And no, I've never been a smoker. I never picked up the habit of cigarettes, mostly because I was always disgusted by their constant smoking. So that's where I would get the embarrassment. They still smoke a little bit, but not nearly as much as they used to. Let's see, Quark, this is number 8. You're not so friendly bartender. Are you consumed with greed? Do you manage money well? What kind of role does money play in your life? I say I don't think I'm particularly greedy. Fairly simple for the most part. My wife teaches math on a secondary and a college level, so she basically handles the finances and the money in the household. She's just more of a numbers person. She basically lets me know what the budget is, and I go and I get the groceries and other kind of essentials. Other than that, my spending takes, mostly is very small transactions, like buying some books, mostly used books, which don't cost a lot of money. I don't have very expensive hobbies. I do like swords, but I haven't bought them in a while because I can't really afford it. Yet I don't have that kind of disposable income, but I'm not somebody who has like a love of cars and, spend tons of money on automobiles. So my hobbies are relatively cheap. I don't need a lot of money to be happy. And the final one, number 9, Gold Ducat, the honorable enemy. Have you ever worn padded leather, had a complete mental breakdown, and thrown around bolts of mystical energy? Padded leather, yeah, I've kind of worn that. Things like Renaissance Fair and medieval cosplay for that. It's been a long time since I've done that, but I used to do that when I was younger. I've never had a mental breakdown, no. And bolts of mystical energy, no. I've never gotten too much into mysticism, except for, I mentioned before how, I basically knew I was atheist. I left Christianity, but when I was a teenager, I still felt like I needed some kind of religion. Something that, again, I don't feel like I need today. I just want to kind of adopt mythopoetic and ritual maybe into my life. But I don't necessarily need religion. But back when I was a teenager, I thought maybe I still did. So I looked into Wicca a little bit. So I tried a little bit of that Wiccan mysticism a little bit, and it just didn't really work out for me at all. I felt foolish. And that's not, that's nothing against people who are Wicca. I'm just saying, me as a secular person, naturally secular person, I can't do anything like that without feeling silly. But if you can do it, more power to you. I have, I would say, more in common with Wiccans than I do with Christians in a lot of ways, as far as the way that they view religion and spiritualism. Or spirituality, I should say. So that is it. That is the Deep Space Nine tag from Book Trek 2023, created by Steve Donahue. I want to thank him for being a great co-host for the event and also creating these tags. And as always, thank you, BookTube.